Hey everyone coming in. Great to see so many people dialing in from all around the world. I looked at the stats and I think we've got something like 27 different countries dialing in, so it's great. It'd be great to find out where everyone's dialing in from, so maybe you want to say a quick hi in the chat, and good to get the conversation going if you can. We'll just give it a couple more minutes while everyone is dialing in. I see we've got a couple more people coming in, and then we'll make starts. Where is everyone dialing from? Molly, are you in London now?
I am in London, yeah. I'm in the office too, which is a nice change of pace.
Oh, wow. You guys, are you West End?
We're in Mayfair.
Very nice.
Yeah, the office is pretty quiet. It's definitely not full, but it's nice for me to have a change of pace.
Awesome. And Austin and Derek, US, right?
Yep, I'm in Northern Michigan right now, typically based on the West Coast, but I'm in Northern Michigan right now.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm calling from San Francisco.
You two back to work now, or are you all kind of still working from home?
Working from home.
We were remote before the pandemic, so yeah, still remote.
Amazing. Okay, I think we'll get the conversation started. Hey everyone, great to see some of you all here. Super excited to dive into this new space, the creator economy, which has been such an exciting sector to be watching as a creator, but also in the event space, really since the pandemic began. So excited to be speaking more about this booming sector. How today's conversation is going to work is I'm going to have a fireside chat with our awesome guest speakers here today for the first 40 minutes or so. And towards the end of the event, if you have any questions for the guest speakers towards the end of the event, please feel free to put them in the chat or Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And of course, be more than happy to answer the questions and put them to our guest speakers. Before we go into today's conversation then, why didn't we hear from our guest speakers? Maybe a quick intro, who you are and where you're calling from. Maybe Molly, Derek, and then Austin.
Sure, yeah. So Molly Alter, calling in from London. I'm an investor here at Index Ventures. And we invest quite a bit in the creator economy and actually have been for a while, across our portfolio, Figma, Patreon, Discord, Roblox, which recently went public, Linktree, Creative Juice, Pinata Farms. So we're definitely bullish on the sector at large, and really excited to be, thinking through the next wave of innovation here. I'm originally a New Yorker, have moved to London about 7 months ago now. Getting used to a new city and a pandemic is not always easy, but it's really great to be here today with all of you and with fellow panelists.
Hi everyone, I'm Derek. I am a product manager at YouTube, and I have worked in the creator economy space long before it had a name, actually. So for the past around 8 or 9 years now, I've made a tour of duty around big content platforms, Facebook, Twitch, a smaller company called Yak, and now at YouTube. And consistently, I've just been really super interested in how creators are able to monetize and make a living with their individuality and their creativity. And I've been building products now for a number of years, and it's just super interesting to see this huge explosion of interest in the past few. And I'm very excited to see where this whole thing goes. And yeah, looking forward to a lively discussion with the panelists here.
Hi everyone, I'm Austin. I'm founder and CEO of a company called Racket that we just launched about 8 weeks ago. And it is a platform that makes it insanely easy to record and publish and share audio content. So you can record with anyone in the world via just a link. They don't need to sign up for an account, and you have up to 9 minutes to say something interesting, and then it's instant turnaround. No one's allowed to edit the audio, and so you just instantly get a link to share of the Racket that you just made, and that's what I do.
If those of you who haven't checked out Racket, you must. It's one of my favorite new consumer apps. How is it launching a new consumer app during a pandemic?
It's been, well, actually I've launched two. So we built the first audio product that we built kind of worked okay. And we launched that in the fall and then kind of came away with some insights and then built Racket. And we built the MVP over like 4 weeks basically in March and then launched it at the beginning of April. So again, really, really fresh. And yeah, it kind of like exploded on Twitter right away. So we had like 1,000 signups the first day. And then like by the end of the first week, there were 5,000 signups, now like 15,000. So we had like a waitlist thing that we've been working really hard to get people off of the waitlist because we didn't want it to feel exclusive, but we also just very much were not ready. Like we didn't anticipate the energy that kind of happened. So that's been really, really cool to see. And yeah, I don't know that the pandemic, like how much that plays into it. I think doing something in audio, obviously everyone has heard of Clubhouse and seen the amazing trajectory they've been on. And so that has maybe helped make people kind of excited about trying new things in audio. And I think, I mean, for us, the really, really obvious insight was just that there are so many people that want to start a podcast, that talk about starting a podcast, and there's less than 1 million podcasters in the world. And whereas there's 100 million bloggers, 100 million TikTok creators. And so if you just like remove all the friction and let people just talk into a microphone and publish it, then it would unlock a lot of kind of creativity. And that's kind of what we've seen so far in these early weeks. So yeah, it's been cool. I don't know how much the pandemic has impacted our launch one way or the other though.
Was a great product. So anyone who hasn't checked it out, yeah, you should definitely check it out. And those of you who I haven't met before, awesome to meet you. My name is Ollie Forsyth. I'm the Global Community Manager here at Antler. We are a global early stage investor investing in entrepreneurs right at the very beginning, all the way up to Series C and beyond. And it's been so fascinating watching the creator economy space. Really for the last 18 months, I became really frustrated as a creator and podcaster myself. Why do podcasters not get paid the same as music artists do on the streaming platforms? And probably like some of our friends here in the audience, that some of us and our friends were unfortunately losing our jobs, and we had to turn to our unique set of skills to earn a source of income. And there was just this whole explosion of people turning to their creativity to make a means of income. So it got me super excited about this space and excited to dive into the conversation with our guest speakers today. We're going to be covering 3 main aspects of the creator economy today. And those are, how do we get here? What are the current trends and challenges we're seeing in the creator economy? And what do we think is next? So love to really kickstart the conversation with the panelists, and maybe Austin, you can go first. What do you think got us here in the creator economy space, and why is it such a huge, I guess, gigantic generational shift in people wanting to become creators?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm curious to hear everyone else's answers to this, but I mean, to me, I think a huge part of the creator economy has been kind of around since the dawn of the internet, which is like just the ability to connect people and let people kind of express creativity. Like that has been happening for a long time, and then even the monetization side of it has been happening, but it required a lot of heavy lifting. If you wanted to like make a living writing a newsletter 15 years ago, there were people who did that online, but it wasn't like easy. There weren't tools to do that, and kind of getting distribution. Similarly, there weren't platforms that helped you kind of drive distribution and go viral and all of those things. And so I think a lot of this has been happening for a long time, and but I think what we've started to see is just that like initially it was like, okay, there are these people. Ben Thompson is an example lots of people use of like a person who's making lots and lots of money just writing for a kind of somewhat small audience, but an audience that pays him. And now we've seen people kind of all the way, at every different level of kind of audience size and income that are like kind of following that path. And so I think it feels like a natural evolution to me, and doesn't feel necessarily like a kind of shift in direction. It's just like we've been climbing the same ladder, and we are higher up that ladder, so it's easier for people to reach an audience and to monetize.
Derek, what do you reckon?
Sure. I think this is a really big question of how we got here, right? And I think that fundamentally, the question is really about the continual advancement of creation and distribution technologies like Austin was talking about, right? And this is generally been fueled by people's hunger for information and knowledge throughout the years. And so if we zoom all the way out, like beyond creator economy, I actually think that this goes way before the internet, right? So all right, story time. So if we go all the way back to like the 15th century, right, where the first very significant creation technology advancement happened, right, the Gutenberg printing press thing, right? Like prior to this, hand copying books was the only way that you have of like actually getting copies of books out, right? And so before that, the cost of getting a hand copy of a book was as much as a house, right? Just to put it in context for people out there. And it took like 3 years after that invention was created to like basically make 200 copies of the Bible. And that was a very, very massive, impressive forward leap in that technology at the time compared to the alternative. Unfortunately, the invention was ultimately like commercially useless until the advent of a distribution network for books, right? And so this kind of a bottleneck between creation and distribution technology exists even in modern day, where ebooks, for the large part, didn't have a market until the advent of the Kindle and e-readers, right? And so we see this today. And throughout history, I think there have been numerous such inflection points for either creation technology or distribution technology. Just to rattle off a few, like newspapers, typewriters, cameras, motion picture things, PCs, cell phones. Until now, we have this like modern day the biggest modern day advancement, I think, for both creation and distribution side from a consumer software perspective was actually YouTube. And that's what promoted a lot of the mass market sort of adoption and the birth of a UGC driven media landscape that we've now kind of shifted towards this creator economy space. And so, okay, that was a really long-winded way of saying, like, we've come here a long way, but it's a continual trend, like Austin was talking about. And if we just zoom into this like very last decade of how the creator economy has evolved, my perspective is that the ecosystem is basically maturing in ways that allows these platforms to facilitate more easier connection between content and people. And it's a good thing that it's like continuing to remove power basically from gatekeepers of the last sort of century. And so as a result, I think like our consumption behaviors have also been like largely shifting from like traditional television to these like online digital content. And to answer your question very directly now, I think what led to this, to where we are today, are actually these like shining lighthouse examples of outlier winners in the creator economy. So people have really grown on these platforms and went on to become really iconic household names in all sorts of different entertainment verticals, right? Justin Bieber, Jenna Marbles, Casey Neistat, and more like contemporary ones like Emma Chamberlain, Ninja, and that's just to name a few. And these shining examples of success are basically what promotes a lot of a desire for the next generation.
I think these are really great points, and I don't want to be, repetitive and say, the availability of creation tools and new business models and social networks that are encouraging this. One thing I think that is also, not always mentioned is just, the amount of free time has really been a crucial component to the boon of the creator economy. And this is a lot of ways linked to other trends we see around automation. So much of our economy right now has been really streamlined via a number of SaaS tools, which we at Index also invest in. And these are things that maybe they've been done by humans but for generations, but perhaps they would be better done by computers and robotic processes. And there's something, we lost somebody. There's something very humanistic about people spending time on creation rather than spending time executing various processes. Think like your traditional factory worker. So again, taking a big picture point of view here, you zoom out and you look at good, we got Ollie back. You zoom out and you look at human history. People were working 12 hours a day doing repetitive tasks. Now we don't have to do this. And so not only do people have time to create content, they have time to consume content, and you can't have one without the other. So, you look at just the sheer number of hours people are spending per day on platforms like TikTok or Instagram, just, top of the head. And you see that is, directly influencing the growth of this economy. So, we hear a lot about how automation is wreaking havoc on communities, and it certainly is. And I'm not going to say that, everyone that is laid off from a factory in, rural Wisconsin can go and become a TikTok star. Like that's not realistic. But it is a fact of life that, we're seeing these groups of people with tremendous amounts of time, and they're using that time oftentimes in very humanistic ways and ways that are creating art or creating comedic content. And that's really exciting to me. And then, on top of that, they're able to monetize that. And so it is really, a very 21st century situation we're in, because we have, really automated away all of the other ways that we used to spend our days.
I'd love to maybe find out great insights on how do we get here, but also I'd be really curious to find out what captivated your interest in the creator economy. I mean, we're all in the tech sector, and we could focus on anything from fintech, AI, robotics to the creator economy. Why for you was the creator economy in particular so interesting? And love to maybe hear all of your thoughts, but maybe Austin, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I guess like people put us Racket in this bucket of like a creator economy company, and I think I guess it's not. For me, it wasn't like I started from I want to participate in the creator economy or build something for the creator economy. But I think a lot of my career has been around kind of media and online community and things like that, and I'm really focused on those things. And so for me, it is purely building Racket, particularly, is entirely about kind of unlocking creativity in the world. And so like I said, it's like there's less than 1 million podcasters in the world, and I am just not at all convinced that those are the only people who have something interesting to say. And so it's really about unlocking that, about giving people a microphone who were never going to go through the 2-year grind that it takes to get a podcast off the ground, and who actually do have something interesting to say. And so I don't know if that's really an answer, but that is my answer.
Yeah, pretty similar answer here. I've just been really attracted to the prospect of giving people more of a voice. And I feel like, in my experience, a lot of the creators that have become successful, they tell really interesting stories, or they ignite really important conversations. They're able to like build community and really rally people behind a cause that means something beyond just them. And I think that like enabling more people to do those things, make a living doing it, is actually really empowering and like feels fulfilling in my work so far. And so I want to continue.
Yeah, I actually have a little bit of a background as a creator, so I have a soft spot for it. My family has a political radio show, and it's sort of like a podcast, but actually it's more of a traditional radio show because it's on Sirius XM. And so I've been doing that for over 5 years and got a little taste of the creator lifestyle. So that was, I think, why I originally got into it. But more theoretically, I do believe that it's a very democratic shift. It used to be that the forum and the public discourse was decided by various gatekeepers. Even just taking one example, there were people that decided what was shown on TV, and those people, they controlled the 10 channels that there were, and you could choose between those, but that was it. And now with TikTok, we essentially decide what's on TV. If certain types of content are getting a lot of engagement, people will make more of that content, and you'll also see more of that content because of the way that the algorithm works. But there's something very, very cool and special about that. And that's one example, but you see it across these various components of the creator economy. So as someone who loves democracy, I think it speaks to me in that sense too.
We're also seeing this really interesting shift where I think especially my age category, the Gen Zs, they're no longer wanting to become the doctors, bankers, or lawyers as future careers. They want to become creators. And I think this is such a huge fundamental shift. But the most interesting aspect of this is that they no longer dream on becoming a creator, they already plan on becoming one. Why do you think we're seeing this huge, I guess, gigantic generational shift where people no longer want to go down that typical, maybe corporate career route? Instead, they want that full autonomy over what they do on a day-to-day basis. They want full control of their gender, and they just really want to make money. They want to make money off what they love doing. Why do you think this is now happening, and why is now the time to be in the creator economy space? Anyone can have a go first, but maybe Derek, go for it first.
I actually question part of the premise that people ever really aspire to be like, I want to be that corporate person, right? Like, I actually don't know if that's true, but I think to answer your question, going back to like what I said before too, the prominence of the success of these like outlier winners in the creator economy has really contributed to who's visible, right? To kids, even at a very young age. And those people who are sort of propped up as like these heroic figures, larger than life figures, those tend to be what kids aspire to as heroes, right? And so if you think back, 50 years ago, maybe that was the astronaut, or maybe that was the firemen, right? Like the superheroes of that generation. And I think today, the more visibility that we like give to creators, I think the more likely it is that kids are aspiring to be them. The difference, and like, I think that the argument for why this doesn't necessarily matter might be something like, well, it's not like every kid became an astronaut or fireman, right? Like over the past few decades. And to that, I would say like, well, okay, so it's actually really difficult to get the skill sets and the experience that you would need to qualify in those types of roles. Whereas, let's just be very honest, it's super accessible to become a creator in 2021 and beyond, right? You have any number of tools at your disposal. Pick up a PC, a cell phone, a camera, and you are ready to go. You're ready to start creating and publishing. And so I think that like that in itself will continue as a trend where creation continues to get easier, creation continues to get higher quality, because now we have building blocks that people can remix over and over again. And I think that's part of the huge boom that we've seen in the TikTok ecosystem, right? Is remixing creativity, that critical threshold of creativity that people can build upon. And so I actually think that it's just going to get easier and easier to become a creator. And so the quality of content for consumers is also going to increase over time. So I just think that this is going to be, it's just going to be a upward trend from here. Looking forward to what the other panelists have to say.
Well, I totally agree with you. And I very much think it's this really powerful feedback loop. And one thing that's super interesting is that recently, a lot of these platforms have been very much decoupled from traditional social graphs. So, with TikTok, you don't need to have friends. You can just sign up and start creating, and you can get very immediate and very widespread feedback. And feedback is what drives a lot of this interest in becoming a creator. Nobody wants to make content and get, 3 people that watch it and like 1 thumbs up. That's what kills the creator economy. With TikTok, you see people start and their first TikTok, and the algorithm's actually optimized for this, where your first TikTok will get a little bit of an extra boost. But you see people who get their first TikTok and they'll get, 20,000 views. And that feedback loop is very powerful. And you have that sort of encouragement that hadn't necessarily existed before and wasn't possible when things were linked to your social graph, where at the very most, maybe all of your friends on Facebook would like your post. Maybe that's 50 people. And so I think it is this very virtuous cycle where, people are getting more feedback, and so they're creating more content, and then more content is created, and then better content is created. And so people tune in more. And it just, makes this world where everyone feels like they can contribute and everyone feels validated by what they're contributing.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. So I don't know if I have too much to add, but I think I think what kids aspire to is what has the most visibility, and huge YouTubers and TikTokers clearly have that. And again, the kind of accessibility thing where you see people who didn't come from some amount of like connections or money or anything else, and TikTok, more than any other platform before it, I think has like really just unlocked this, where someone can in a matter of months go from just being a high school kid in wherever and to suddenly being a global star. And so I think it's just, when you see that, then it's like, there's no reason to think that you couldn't do that. Whereas you see Michael Jordan when I was growing up, and it's like, I would love to be Michael Jordan, but like, I'm just not capable of playing basketball. And so I can't even like have that aspiration. But I think when you see the content that people are making, which is amazing. So it's not that you like, it's not to kind of discredit the quality of the content, but it just feels more within reach because you're already on TikTok, you're playing the same game they are. And it's just like, if you can get your content to the quality that these people have, then you can achieve that. And so it feels within reach, I think.
I mean, Derek, you made such a good point where it's now becoming easier and easier for creators or for individuals to become creators, right? But I think so much of this comes down to, especially much bigger platforms like YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, enabling really anyone to become creators. How do we think about, especially the much larger platforms, catering to the creator middle class? So those people who may not have 1 million, 2 million followers is your typical person down the street who loves making videos about music or making coffee or making bagels. How does YouTube think about creating the middle class of creators?
Yeah, so I think the way that YouTube and other content distribution platforms really have to begin shifting perspectives on how they think about creators is aligning that incentive so that the success of creators is aligned with the success of the platforms. And right now, I'm not 100% sure that's true across all of these different platforms, right? So as an example, I think when creators look at the amount of platform cut revenue share on the revenue that they generate, I think there's a growing trend perception of creators saying like, oh, the platforms are taking too much, right? And I think that that's one perception that needs to be sort of overcome. And I think the business models like have potential to be shifted in a way that facilitates more growth for creators. It's tough. Obviously, it's like not an answer that we can like arrive at in the next 10 minutes. But I think that's one aspect of it. YouTube, I think, is actually the platform that's been most transparent and has like paid a lot of attention to how much creators earn on the platform. I think like in Susan's last year-end newsletter, she announced that over the past 3 years, there have been something like $30 billion distributed to creators. So average that out is like about $10 billion a year paid out to creators. And I don't think other platforms have actually published those types of numbers. I think that right now, platforms generally align on two sets of metrics as their output success, right? One is around the time spent, consumption, engagement type of stuff. So whether that's like video watch time, engagement, conversations, whatever the actual product is, it determines that metric. And the second is revenue. And I think that like internally, the teams already track some semblance of creator success on the platforms. But I think more and more for these platforms to remain relevant and grow alongside the creator economy, they have to really put a lot more emphasis and focus on the creator success they're driving.
You made a really good point there around the take rates. And by the way, for Derek's reference, the annual report Susan put out was absolutely phenomenal, so definitely check it out. But on the take rate of platforms, you've got smaller platforms which are taking 5% all the way up to 20-30%. At what point does it come a point where platforms need to put a cap on how much they charge creators? So if you have a creator who's making $1 million a year, if you take OnlyFans or Substack, for example, they're charging their 10-20%. They aren't really providing the discoverability. When does it come a point when the platforms either need to put in a cap rate or do they switch their business models? Do we have any thoughts on that? Maybe Molly, like, I'd love to actually hear your thoughts being in the venture space. When you look at new companies focusing on that particular type of revenue stream, what do we think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it'll oftentimes be governed, in the same sort of supply demand way that most things are governed. If creators are able to see another path to taking a higher take rate, like they will seek that out in a very logical way. And it's interesting to think, there are actually a pretty meaningful amount of different ways to price and monetize. You know, there's these sort of more ad hoc, like the traditional kind of Kickstarter. There's subscription, like Patreon. There's more like tip jar type of ways to monetize. There's selling engagement like Cameo. And then there's, you know, of course, like courses that are a little bit more, you know, Kajabi, OutSchool like. And then some people, you know, are only monetizing via merchandise. And so I think what we'll see is that as these options continue to increase, if a creator is feeling like they're being stiffed, for lack of a better word, by whatever platform they're using, I think we'll see a lot of movement across those. And I think that especially as, you know, people get very large and very you know, independent of the discovery component of whatever platform they're using, you'll see that power only increase, and you'll see those take rates go down. Now, for the long tail, for the middle class that Derek was talking about, I think there's actually a lot of inflexibility, because they're very much reliant on those providers, and so I think you'll probably see the structures stay the same. But I agree with what you were sort of referring to, Ollie, that, you know, for people who make it really big, there probably is a bit of a cap. And we see, you know, one of our portfolio companies, a business called Creative Juice, they're building, you know, financial products for creators, and their first product is essentially an estimator that allows you to try to get a really good sense of what you're worth, and it's sort of like a Zestimate for, you know, Zillow. And as creators get a better appreciation for the value that they're providing and what they are entitled to, I think you'll see greater competition, and I think you'll see more switching, more, you know, competitive platforms emerging, and ultimately, you know, a better deal for the creators who are actually providing the content.
Derek, is this a space YouTube would ever go down? The whole tipping, the paid memberships, which I think you guys are already doing. How does YouTube think about that? And ultimately, I think it's going to help create that middle class creators, like we were discussing earlier. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. So YouTube does have products and features related to non-ads monetization. So on live streams, consumers can buy super chats or super stickers, and those are revenue shared with the creators so that they go to financially support them. On VODs, there's something in the works, and of course on the newest shorts content format, there's kind of opportunity there. That's a open space, right? Like no one has really figured that piece out yet, and TikTok creators that I've spoken with, they generally have a lot of success getting discovered. I think Molly was referring to like the algorithm really helping creators who are getting started new without like an existing graph. But a lot of them have really struggled turning that social capital and that attention into financial capital, right? And I think that's a space that I think is ripe for the picking. And right now, there actually hasn't been a first mover, right? Like the first mover, quote unquote, has actually just been these bridge funds that companies have launched in support of creators. It's non-sustainable. I'll pause there basically, but it's not a long-term solution.
Awesome. It's great to hear your thoughts. I mean, there is, again, so much to talk about. I know we've only got 10, 15 minutes left. As a quick recap then, so we've covered how platforms are going to potentially cater to the middle class. We've discussed how do we get here in the creator economy, but maybe we talk about some of the trends that's really driving this new booming sector. The audio space, I think, is super interesting, and awesome what you've done at Racket in such a short period of time is truly fascinating. What do we think of the audio space right now, and is the whole audio space going to shift once we turn back to some form of normality, especially with the likes of Clubhouse and Racket coming to the market? Also, maybe go ahead and share some insights.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Clubhouse, I can see how that, I mean, for me, part of the appeal of Clubhouse was to be able to open up an app and hear in real time people that I like really look up to, like someone like Naval would be just in there talking. And I think a lot of those highly influential, very busy people that were just hanging out in Clubhouse are going to be back to their schedules of traveling nonstop and maybe spending less time in there. But I think that like, whether it's async or synchronous, I think consumption of audio content is just massive, and it has been massive for 100 years. And so I I don't think that the pandemic was really as much of an inflection point as some people have kind of said that it was for audio as a sort of content consumption medium. But I do obviously think that it was like a kind of a fantastic moment for Clubhouse to launch, and so I think that they captured that moment. But I don't really expect the kind of consumption side to be changing. Podcasts have been growing, and they grew faster during the pandemic, but they've been growing like crazy for a long time. And then terrestrial radio has been holding strong in a way that television and newspapers haven't. And so I think that there's, yeah, I don't know. I just think audio as a medium is kind of here to stay.
Long term, how do you think about, I guess, supporting your creators? Are there going to be tipping options, membership options, similar to what Clubhouse and other creator economy platforms offer?
So it's a good question. I think we're thinking about this a lot, and so I guess, like, to go to what Derek was saying about TikTok, I don't know that I would agree that TikTok has failed their creators. I think that people who build big distribution on TikTok have had no trouble making a living out of it, and maybe they're not able to like extract every possible dollar out of it, but as soon as it becomes about extracting every possible dollar, then it like just changes the entire dynamic. And what we've seen on Racket in these early days is the most interesting content is coming from people who don't think of themselves as podcasters or content creators, and who don't care about monetizing because they're just having fun playing and talking. Like, there's this guy named Reddy who's hosted, I think, 140 interviews on Racket. So he's interviewed 140 people in 8 weeks since we launched, and he had never made a podcast. We didn't know him. He just like showed up and started doing this, and he talks about it a lot. He's like, he just thinks of it as play. He like DMs someone he likes and talks to them and publishes the conversation. And I think that there's something really special about that. And I think that if you can deliver on distribution, then people will always find a way to monetize it. And if you keep that separate from the platform for as long as possible, I think that can have a lot of positive effects on the kind of type of content and type of people. Because I think there are, if you're a deep expert in an industry and you want to be like doing industry analysis that people want to pay for, then I think it makes sense to charge right out of the gate. But I think there's so much, if you build a platform aimed around helping the people who want to monetize their content be successful, then I think you really limit the amount of kind of just the top of the funnel. I think a lot of people who have never made content or don't think of themselves as a content creator, like, aren't even close to the point of thinking they should be getting paid to do it. So they're just, if they feel like it's a tool that they have to do that, then I think it's pretty limiting. And so I think we're going to probably move more slowly on implementing any sort of creator monetization, because I think if we can just continue to deliver on giving people who have interesting things to say more and more distribution week after week after week, then they will find ways to use that to build their own business, or to monetize however they want, or to link to their Venmo, or whatever they want to do. And I think that it's just that's a shift that I think that a lot of people are trying to skate this line between, like, are you a distribution platform? Are you a monetization platform? And I think that it will be interesting to see how it plays out. But I kind of feel like it might make sense for these things to actually like remain bifurcated. So.
Yeah, I don't.
It's super interesting.
Sorry, Ollie, go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, I actually don't disagree at all. The TikTok platform has definitely not failed its creators, right? Like, it's actually.
Yeah, I realized that maybe I was like, I put words in your mouth that you didn't really say. So sorry about that.
No worries at all. I actually totally agree with the point. And in some ways, the platforms that are focused on distribution, they do distribution better than anyone, right? And I think that there's a whole reason for that in terms of its focus. Let's see, what did I want to add to this? It kind of slipped my mind now. Maybe come back to me. Ollie, you were saying something?
Yeah, what I was saying, while you think about the idea of what I was going to come back to you, I think a really another interesting part of the creator monetization, which is really skyrocketed in the last 6 months, is this NFT and social token space, which nobody really has grasped yet, I don't think, what are we thinking about the NFT space and social tokens? You know, was it Beeple, he sold his first piece of art, or one of his pieces of art, for $69 million, Jack Dorsey's first tweet for $2.5 billion, a dancing cat for $5.5 million. What's going on in this space, and do you think it's here to stay? Molly, we'd love your take from the venture point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very early, and you know, we can again use history as a guide here and think back to, you know, other speculative periods throughout time. You know, you think back to the tulips in the mid 20th century, and that was sheer speculation. And you know, tulips are not, you know, they're worth the same amount as other flowers now. But then you think back to other, you know, asset classes that seemed extremely speculative at the time and ended up being very valuable. And so I personally think it's a little bit early to tell here. But at the end of the day, you know, all of our economies are built on our collective imaginations. Like, you know, we say that, you know, even in investing, we say that the value of a company is something. It doesn't actually mean that the company is worth that much. But then once we say it is, then it is worth that much. And so theoretically speaking, you know, I think it's clear that, you know, NFTs are not some ridiculous concept, and it can't be kind of shrugged off as something that'll be here today and gone tomorrow. But you know, it really does remain to be seen. You know, at Index, we're a lot more interested in very tangible use cases for NFTs rather than kind of, you know, purely investing behind different specific, you know, whether it be, you know, soccer trading cards or whatever it is. We think that, you know, if creators can use NFTs as an additional channel to monetize their own, you know, their own base, that's a lot more interesting for us. And what tools enable them to do that in an easy way, that's a lot more interesting for us than taking a bet on any specific NFT asset class, because those, you know, are a little bit more difficult to predict, even though I'm sure some of them will end up being very resilient.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I just want to add on that in terms of NFTs, actually, I'm not super interested in like any particular NFTs as much as like the overall trend of this is the next cycle of disintermediation that's happening for creators to directly be able to monetize the attention that they're garnering and the community experiences that they're offering, right? And so I think that there's a number of things that's happening in the adjacent spaces as well that facilitate this transition from creators just being sources of entertainment to now becoming actual businesses. And I think like one really interesting kind of early thing that's happening is social tokens, where creators are actually able to offer some level of stake and access to their communities, to themselves, to their content, to a decision-making process, to their hardcore fans that buy into them as like a token, right? And I think it's in the really early days. And again, like social tokens, most of them may not work out very well, but I'm sure a few of them will. But this general promise that creators are able to, or sorry, consumers are able to invest into the creators they really believe in and have a stake in their success in the future is something really powerful. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. The thing that I was going to add on to Austin's previous point was that I think it's definitely reasonable to say that like a pretty healthy portion of creators who just start out, they don't go in with like, I want to make a ton of money doing this, right? Like they start by having fun and having a lot of creative ideas that they bring up from nothing. And so I think like distribution is really, really key there. I think what I'm really concerned about, and I'm like not sure this is going to happen, but I'm looking forward to like the conclusion of how they can parlay that distribution power into monetary power in a way that is like process oriented, like repeatable, right? And I think those are the level step function changes that are going to put like creators to the next level. I would hate for platforms to like turn into the new like, oh, but you get exposure, right? Like, don't worry about getting paid, you just get exposure and like give us your content for free. And I don't think that's the right sort of incentive type of alignment that I would foresee being successful with creators.
Awesome. So many fascinating insights on the NFT space and also audio. Maybe just touching upon valuations, we've got a couple of Q&As coming through, so we'll start diving into those. From the venture point of view, Molly, what do you think are some of the key metrics and KPIs you're looking for in creator economy companies? And the reason why I ask is the creator economy space is really so new. Although some of the companies have been venture backed in the last couple of years, we haven't seen any gigantic, outliers as of yet, apart from the likes of Patreon. Going back to my question, I guess, what are some of the metrics and KPIs you're looking for in creator economy companies?
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that we actually have a little bit more evidence than you'd think, because I do believe that the creator economy has existed for longer than this sort of new age of it. For example, Roblox, one of our portfolio companies that just went public, is in many ways a creator economy bet. That is only different from other platforms because you have this really active creator base that's going in and making these games themselves. But I think when we think about valuation, there's one framework where you look at these companies that are selling into the creator economy, and you look at them and compared to companies that sell into SMBs. And creators, I think it's a bit simplistic because creators are not SMBs, and there are some trends around these creators, hiring up teams and sort of building out their presence and starting to resemble more closely an SMB. But at the end of the day, their behavior is going to look very different. And so, you can't be saying, oh, this creator economy startup has, a annual churn of 50%, and most SMB companies we look at are closer to 70%. Because these are, maybe it's an 18-year-old kid in his garage who has to go back to school, and so he stops creating for a couple months before he starts up again. So it kind of rejects a lot of the traditional, very easy ways that we're used to evaluating companies. And instead, it kind of forces you to really think about the vision and really think about the themes here. And this is always the case when we're early in a cycle. At the beginning of a cycle, it's hard to be very fine-toothed about what the valuations of these businesses might be like, because you don't have a ton of reference points. You can't benchmark every which metric. What you can see is really strong engagement, and you can believe in certain theses or certain approaches to the market that you think make more sense in the long term. So for example, maybe Index is a lot more bullish on companies that are sort of this subscription angle, and they think that is, maybe we think that's the best way to monetize. We don't, we think it's a good way, but we think there are many good ways. Or maybe you think that, people in the long term aren't really going to be able to get anyone to pay, and there's so much subscription fatigue, and I'd rather back companies that are taking the approach of paying for specific services, or more of a tip jar approach. So different firms have different theses there, but I would definitely be wary of anyone who says, there's a really specific and fine-toothed way to value these companies, because we just don't really have a mature enough ecosystem to do that properly. But we'll see.
Awesome. And are there any particular subcategories for the panelists that you're really, really excited about? And any maybe trends and untapped opportunities that has not yet to be seen in the creator economy space? We talked a little bit about social tokens. I think this is going to be really interesting to see and watch. But is anything like we're really excited about that isn't being really talked about as of much yet?
I think creator economy fintech is very interesting. Just when you think about the potential market size, if you're selling a sort of flat fee to every creator to help them, for example, manage their business, it's a very, very large and exciting market. But if you're able to really kind of tap into some of the transactional revenue, you're getting into multi-billion-dollar opportunities. So that's something I think that's pretty interesting. Another trend that we're seeing a lot are things that are really focused on communities. And this is something we see, not even alone in the creator economy. Across all of the companies we look at, we're seeing like chief community operator or officer as a role that's popping up. But particularly within the creator economy, you see this with collabs. You see this with like the creator TikTok houses in California, or on Discord, where there are entire channels that are dedicated to individual creator communities. We're very excited about this trend, and we think that startups that are trying to help creators build their own communities are, it's a little bit underserved, and we think it's an area that's worth spending more time in. But I'd be lying if I said we weren't just broadly excited about the entire ecosystem here.
Awesome. Derek, Austin, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to mention collaboration too as a really strong theme. I think creators are wising up to the fact that this is really a positive sum game, right? A lot of the most successful creators today actually attribute their success to a lucky moment, right? Where a big creator has linked their video or like rated their live stream or whatever. And so I think there's been a very concerted effort to make like explicit opportunities happen where creators live together, right? So that they're able to have more co-creation, cross-promotion, mutual learning opportunities take place more naturally and more frequently. So I think that's an opportunity that, not sure how you scale that, right? Like there's a lot of cohort-based type of learning opportunities for other professions, but what about creators? The other interesting trend that I think is happening is the trend of like investing in creators and creators becoming investors, right? So we've talked about social tokens and NFTs as a way to kind of disintermediate. And I believe that's also a way to kind of invest in the future because you believe that an asset is going to appreciate over time, right? And creators as investors is something pretty new. I'm not a very big expert on this area yet, but I know Legion created an opportunity for entrepreneurs to basically pitch creators who would then be able to allocate some of their capital into your startup. And I think that's a really awesome opportunity because creators actually, very successful ones, they have platform now, right? They have a voice and they can actually become this like not free, but like this marketing arm of sorts, right? That really aligns with your brand. And so I think all of these are pretty interesting trends.
I was going to say in terms of a vertical, I think that music would be really interesting to see some shifts because I think obviously there are examples of like independent unsigned artists that have gotten big without going the old route. But I think that the kind of legacy gatekeepers and power structures are still pretty much in place in terms of like how musicians get to the top. And I would like to see all of that kind of get torn to the ground so that people can just break through. And one thing I was going to say about the idea of creators investing, I think kind of goes back to our conversation before on it's like that the reason that having Mr. Beast on your cap table is valuable is distribution. It's not because of the money that he makes. And I think I know that there is the kind of like I guess meme of like having people do something in exchange for exposure, but I just again really just think that distribution is a real thing, and the dopamine that you get when you go viral is a real thing. And so I think if any of these people at the top had to trade their next year of income or their next year of distribution, they would give up the income and keep the distribution in a heartbeat. And so I think that it really does kind of come down to that, because there's always ways on platform or off platform to monetize distribution.
I think you guys made such a good, interesting point about creators becoming investors purely because they've got the following and they've got cash, and we've seen like the likes of Mr. Beast, who's launched his own creator fund to invest in creators, but also invest into founders. But I think going back to the trends, Austin, what you're building, I almost see creators becoming the new high school teachers or the new supermarkets. I truly believe in the next couple of years, we are going to use creators as the go-to types of people to source information, knowledge, and learn from. I think there's a massive opportunity, especially in education. Do kids sitting in the classroom really want to be listening to their science teacher or their maths teacher who is not very engaging and they don't really care about it? Or would they much rather go on TikTok or Racket and learn from a creator they absolutely love and have that intimate relationship with, learning about the skill or subject? So I think this is really, really fascinating. And the hours flown by, and I think there's so much more we could cover. But maybe just to wrap up, where is the creator economy going to be maybe in the next couple of years? I'd love to take the panelists' takes on that. Anyone can go first. I
mean, I think, like I said at the beginning, I think it's like we're we're climbing this ladder, and we will just be higher up the ladder. So there'll be more people emerging from more farther corners of the world that suddenly are reaching audiences, and more people who are able to make a living and doing something extremely niche that really only appeals to a tiny group of people, but that are spread across the world, but they're able to find those people. And so I think it's just going to be more of all of it, more interesting content, more creative ways for people to make content, better tools for people to ramp up, and just more opportunity, still more people getting connected to the internet. It can sometimes feel like everyone is on the internet, but that's not the case. And so it is still just growing.
I would agree with that. And also I really like your education point, Ollie, as well. It's, for me, it's about demographics and it's about use cases. So, maybe it's older generations that are starting to participate in the creator economy, or maybe it's, to the education point, more use cases. And I think the education one has been, early innings of success, but I agree there's so much room to grow there. Outschool is a very interesting company that has just absolutely excelled during the pandemic. But that's a very specific type of education. There's all these different, even just within that one vertical, all these different use cases. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I generally agree with what's already been said. I think in the near term, it's going to be more iterative improvements on the different aspects of this thing. And I think the industry is going to figure out a way to basically grease the flywheel. And I think right now, the places that it needs more greasing would be community building, monetizing the communities that stand up, and really just like closing the loop on what it means to be successful as a creator and to transition from just being a creator into a creator business. I think those things will be seeing the most advancements in the next couple of years. When I think about this question, I actually generally do think about a much longer time horizon, right? So something that is like completely infeasible for us to talk about how it'll happen or what exactly will happen. But I think some of the directional forecasts that I would have for like 20, 30 years down the road would be a much higher proportion of the population will be creators, right? So there's going to be a spectrum of different outcomes, as always with creators, right? But more of us will actually be creating and publishing. And there's going to be more step function changes to help people create and distribute over that 30-year period. And I think we're going to see actually more creator businesses just like flourish into major brands and media empires that are household names. And I think like there's going to be tools in existence at that time to basically help creators monetize relationships and trust that they build with their fans more directly. And then I think the content is going to be actually more present than it is today, right? In mediums that aren't possible today, right? So in terms of immersive mixed reality, virtual reality settings, I think the metaverse is actually just going to be mainstream at that point, and that we as a society will be spending like a growing portion of our lives in this metaverse, which means the surface area for how we as consumers engage with content and with creators increases exponentially. And so all of those things I think will be directionally true. Now, like, what can businesses do to accelerate us getting there and to take advantage and like sort of capitalize in a way, in a commercially meaningful way? That's, I think, like kind of an open question for me. And that's why I'm excited about this space.
Such awesome takes. And I think to wrap up, at some point, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll eventually be in the creator economy space. No matter what, we'll probably be all educating our true fans, or 100 or 1,000 true fans in some capacity. For anyone interested in the creator economy space or launching your own company, we recently published a mapping of the creator economy space, the 220 plus platforms that are enabling creators to build empires. It was featured in a couple of media outlets and also on Product Hunt. So do check it out. I put it in the chat. But hey, thanks so much to all of our panelists. I know we're running a couple minutes late. So great to grab all of your insights. And to the audience as well, thanks so much for taking the time to come and join us and come along to our next event. Thanks so much, guys, and have an awesome day.
Thanks so much. This is really fun.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.